With the anticipation of excellent literature before us, let's have a small round of applause for the introducer to our first reader, Christopher Higgs.
Good evening. Victoria's Secret says, "Be a summer bombshell." Victoria's Secret asks, "What kind of angel are you?" Victoria's Secret asks, "Have you found the body for you?" Victoria's Secret shouts, "We love everybody." Pank. Contrary. Witness. A group of anorexics take a field trip to the supermarket. The Cavendish is nearing extinction. Copper nickel. Phoebe. Poet lore. On turning 30, still single, forthcoming. Although now it's no longer applicable. Put a soda counter in the ER waiting room. Forthcoming. On our wedding night in the Hotel Duval. Forthcoming. Rattle the fire. Harper Pallet, 5 tattoos. Prairie Schooner. Actually used to work at Prairie Schooner. Prairie Schooner, the city at the bottom of the lake. New Ohio Review. I've been rejected from New Ohio Review. Plowshares, Columbia Poetry Review. The Wreck, earning a title. Praise poem for American girls. The father's memoir without memories. Forthcoming, forthcoming, forthcoming. Main Street Rag, Gargoyle Magazine, Lost in the Red City, His Crazy Ex, 30 Under 30, Biography of a Porn Star, 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 Biography, Wisconsin Review, Blue Mesa Review, A Phantom Lover, His Blue and Gray Sweater, Biography of a Porn Star. Wait, I've already read it. Hold on. Rules. Forthcoming. Testimony from an underwater ornithologist. Ellie Mae. 3 a.m. Magazine. The Cortland Review. From the University of Notre Dame, where she received the Sparks Fellowship as well as her MFA. Will you please welcome one of America's emerging literary talents, the badass, Jaclyn Dwyer.
Thank you, Chris Higgs, for that wild introduction. And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm going to start by reading 3 poems, and then after that, I'll read a short excerpt from a novel. Ode to American Girls. Here's to scissors that clip split ends as easily as ex-boyfriends, the one who died in college, the refugee who crossed a blood-soaked Nile but never could get over you. Cheers to his hibiscus tea, to strong coffee and Kentucky bourbon, daughters pulled deep into Ohioan corn, romances banished to back seats and bar stools. Here's to newlyweds, two-stepping to the second line, waving paper napkins with new names printed in gold. Praise helicopters hovering over frozen lakes in Madison. Wide blades break the ice, a thick fog of ozone trapping brides and wives. Boys toppled out of boats, girls pushed in, the surfacing bodies of all the kids who couldn't swim. Praise black loops, lazy coils etched down 80 like pubic hairs roping down a long white leg. Praise snow clotting fat cataracts over the road. There is nothing for miles, only your hot breath unraveling a memory of wet wool. Blonde girls in hoop skirts getting hitched in a barn. Yellow hair glowing brighter than a burnished brass sacks in Memphis. Praise grandmothers who still pin laundry outside, their long fingers the brittle wax of weeping candles. Fruit flies that fill the kitchen and keep you company nights he is away, his skin clapping against the sweet country ribs of his ex. Praise the end of an excuse with an interrogative. Who? Honey, praise you. Long legs, high arches, the body you never used for ballet, dinners you wasted and drinks you couldn't finish. Praise your revolving hips, hula hoop champ, flip-flops shaken loose in the grass. Your heady lip gloss shines a Montana moon. Denim laced to fringe over a fence during crowning for the milk can dinner queen. The silk screen tee puckered across your chest. Not all Tetons are grand Tetons, but mine are. Praise scrapyards and salvation, briny bodies burrowing deep in flannel sheets. Bayou critters boiled apple red and spread across announcements. You can't help but suck each fatty head like a river lusting after oars. That great bully. Praise forgiveness. The mean girls, badass bitches who stare you down and try to cut you with envy. Praise Jesus. Praise Jehovah. And baby, praise them too. So I got engaged on Friday, as Chris sort of suggested. And in honor of that, I'm going to read a couple of poems that have something to do with engagement or marriage. The morning police found you in a green recycling bin. What could have saved you the day your husband held you hostage? 8 hours in the master bath. Pulled drop pearls until your earlobes frayed fat ribbons. Not the paper cranes we folded the last time I saw you, day before your wedding. I asked why. You said, I'm all he's got. You dangled uneven, so I turned you for the photos, like a lopsided fir, half decorated. Matted branches mushed against the wall. Did you know that he was the burning building from which you needed to be saved? Every day you plucked birth control pills from plastic bubbles, fed to his fist, each pill a promise to stay perched in his hand. 1,000 cranes were not enough. We should have folded more, pressed the creases with our thumbnails. It's not your fault your body swelled like a bell begging to be rung hard and regular. Last semester, I started writing a sonnet series, and this poem comes from that series. Earning a title. Your ex is a skinny girl, skinny like sex-starved cats, like tigers in Thailand teased with soccer balls in plastic wrap. Your ex is a crushed mustard seed. She stains our sheets, cowers in soft earth, and runs from every room I enter, like wind teasing a tail. Your ex is a sieve, a fallen kite, a Cyrillic G, a flattened hook. You ask if I love you. I answer, I do. Do you forgive me? I do. Do you forgive her? I do. Practicing for what comes next, for the question she never got asked. Will you? Do you take? The path to proving my nubility is through humility. When she mocks me on the internet, pokes fun in posts, I laugh too. Did I say nubile? I meant nobility. Really, I do. So I'm going to read a section from a novel, and this is from the beginning, but I'll just give a little bit of context. The chapter is addressed to a former lover who the narrator has left to return home to her father, who she hasn't seen in a few years. And the title is The Lives of the Saints. Had I been born in the Middle Ages, I would have been a saint. One of those sleek women with sharp noses, willfully confined to their beds and immortalized in frescoes by a golden halo radiating around their heads. I could have been Catherine of Siena, who ate only a spoonful a day and shoved trees down her throat to purge, or Saint Veronica, plucking the seeds from an orange and chewing the bitter nubs, one for each of Christ's wounds. Instead, I was born to a large-breasted woman whose mashed potatoes were always so lumpy she traded scrubbed tubers for microwaved instant, and to a man who shared the best part of himself with forgettable strangers, forcing his family to fight for even the most ordinary pockets of time. For nearly a year, when I was 16, the age Catherine of Siena began her first fast, to forestall a marriage to her sister's widower. I spent every minute of every day with my father. The only moments to myself were in the bathroom, but even then he was right outside the door, listening for the sound of twigs or toothbrushes. At night he slept on my trundle, pulled out like a stubborn kitchen drawer so I'd have to step over him to get anywhere. The rickety casters squealed from all the somersaults Cousin Lucy and I had landed there, before her mother married and moved them south to a house on stilts along the coast of one of the Carolinas. It was a way of keeping me in without locks or ligatures. My father was built like a dollhouse, with tiny rooms in him you could only see when you unlatched the side door and split him in half. Each chamber had its own compartment, unconnected to any other room, and accessible only after the entire house had been spread open. Which is why, Tim, it's taken me this long to master the rules for shattering windows, snapping fish scale shingles, and tearing off roofs to climb inside, and why I spent years reassessing the value of everything else in my life in light of what I found there. In our family, my father was the real saint, which was why all those networks kept calling, asking him to explain his breakthrough infant therapy for anorexia on Today's Morning Show and The Look, where he showed photographs of my body stripped to white underwear, a black bar across my eyes like nipples on primetime TV. The nation watched me grow in Polaroids as my body became less shadow. Gaps became grooves, became ridges, until there were no external markers at all. So when I finally returned home 3 years later, I refused the body scanners in the airport and stepped to the side, choosing one small horror over another. The TSA agent directed me to a blue bath mat with yellow footprints I covered with my socked feet. I watched my bins go through the x-ray. The objects of my bag appeared on a screen like an ink drawing. The insides of things always look so much smaller and more delicate than they are, that they might break apart if rattled too hard. A small woman with curly black hair asked if I had any sensitive areas. I wanted to tell her, everywhere, but I shook my head no. My bins passed through and crashed into the end of the conveyor. They sounded like a plastic trash can banging against the curb, dull and hollow. This woman must have weighed under 100 pounds. I could tell she hated this part of her job by the way she refused to look me in the eye. She stood a few inches shorter than I was, but that didn't matter. Smaller was lighter, was thinner. I wished, Tim, that you were there as a constant counterweight to offset her side. Even the small latex gloves bunched over her knuckles like little girl tights sagging at the knees. I wondered if the head of security chose the smallest women for this job so people felt less violated, as if a small touch was less touching. I wanted to explain to her, I haven't always looked this way. I used to be thinner. I can be thinner. I couldn't remember the last time I had another person touch my body, Tim, who wasn't you. Everything swelled against the stranger's hands. They didn't know the right places to touch, the places still thin enough and hard enough, places the bone was close enough to feel. Everywhere the agent touched was wrong. She squeezed my arm, skipping the elbow, and swept her hand over my breasts, convex enough to be called breasts again. When she pinched my waistband, she pulled the fabric away from my skin, so even her knuckles didn't touch my hip bones. I wanted to beg her, please touch the ripples of my spine, the corners of my scapulae, the hard knobs of every vertebrae, especially between my shoulder blades where it still hurts to sit against a straight-back chair. But she'd already checked her hands for whatever they checked for and told me to collect my things and leave. I took my shoes from their plastic bins. The soles clapped against the floor, and I shoved my feet in so fast my heels flattened the backs. I shuffled to keep my feet from slipping out. My clothes felt heavy, and I didn't know if it was the anxiety of returning home or the memory of being measured and weighed or some confluence of both. I hurried past the newsstands and kiosks selling magazines and candy so bright it looked like bags of small toys as I moved toward the gate. But when I reached the booksellers, I couldn't help but look for it, and there it was, buried along the back wall instead of fanned atop a glossy pyramid where I'd seen it last, his book on me. The papers and magazines had called it revolutionary, not just the medical ones. Oprah, too, had called it life-changing and emotionally gravitating. I didn't know what that meant. I opened to the printed insert in the center of the book, which I flipped forward and backward to watch me grow and shrink. Collarbones rose like the walls of an eroded riverbank, hip bones deep enough to hold on to. In profile, a curved rib cage that stuck out like a deep overbite. I stared at those skinny pictures so long, I was afraid I'd miss my flight. For the saints, it was never about being skinny. It was a denial, a punishment, a way of disciplining the self and body to become closer to God. When I tried to explain this to my parents, my mother nodded as if she understood. She accepted my determination as she'd accept a decision to become a nun or join a leper colony. It was not the life she chose for her daughter, but any choice rooted in faith was one she could not contest. My father shook his head and said, "This is not the world we live in, Evie." For most girls, this might have meant 6 weeks at Renfrew until their insurance bumped them, sacrificing a semester of tuition for a stint at Palisades, followed by groups at the University Counseling Center when they gained too much weight to remain inpatient. For me, Tim, it was eating plastic army men, chewing Barbie feet, and sucking pacifiers so small I had to hold them in place with my teeth. My father was psychiatric chair at the University of Philadelphia, pioneering a revolutionary cure for undereating disorders. I was patient 001. He instructed and observed, documenting every piece of plastic that grazed my lips, taking furious notes on those that made it into my mouth, and photographing every object I idly tongued: pen caps, bobby pins, fingernails. The anorectic needs to relearn how to eat, he wrote in chapter 1. And objects have no calories. There should be no fear of inorganic ingestion. An accidental Lego is a positive step toward recovery. I flipped to the back flap of the dust jacket to see his picture. It was an old photo. The father who called my name during softball games and hot-glued blue marbles to a shoebox to represent water in a diorama of the ocean, when I was still small enough for him to lift me onto his shoulders. After a long list of proper nouns, the last sentence read, "He lives with his wife and daughter." It was the only note that mattered, and the only sentence he requested. I looked around the airport, everyone in some state of leaving or return, and set the book back on the shelf. The first time I fainted, Tim, I fell through 2 sets of doors and landed wet and naked in the upstairs hall. My mother heard the sound of my body muffled against the carpeted floor. The shower was still running when she found me, the shower door flung open, spraying across the tile and into the carpeted hall. When I didn't respond to my name, she called my father at his office and said Evie's had a spell. When I came to, she wouldn't let me up. "Your father says wait," and wouldn't let me even grab a towel. She described to him what happened because he didn't know what spell meant. She was in the shower. No, I don't think she slipped. It must have been too hot. There was so much steam. She couldn't breathe. Following his instructions, she knelt beside me and tried to take my pulse, the phone still pinched between her ear and shoulder. She pulled my wrist away from my breast, white and wriggly as a poached egg, and had to keep recounting because I wouldn't stop repositioning my arm to better cover myself. After I got up, I watched the wet spot in the carpet shrink like wrap lines on a beach receding at low tide. It took 20 minutes for my entire body to shrivel and disappear as if it had never been there at all. Thank you.